Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight, I have also from Central Florida, broadcasting from the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, I have Professor Pixel. Tonight's a special episode show here at 6 o'clock live, which we sometimes don't do. We're going to start for the next 12 weeks. All episodes from 1991's Dark Shadows revival release, which of course takes Dan Curtis's late 60s, early 70s TV show that set the tone for gothic, soapy ass romance, crazy over the top werewolves, vampires, and all that, and made it okay for TV, and just condensed it down in the late 80s, early 90s mismatch of what I would call turtlenecks, shoulder pads, and hot people. Because I gotta say, Pixel, watching this back in 91 and also watching Twin Peaks, I said, okay, this is where I want TV to go. And outside of X-Files, maybe later Millennium, it didn't. So I was left disappointed on a high note because I have not watched this since then. And actually, for you Dark Shadows fans out there, you know what we're getting ready to get into here. And I will say this. I've not really watched much of the original show. My parents would tell me it was on for well over 1,200 episodes, and they saw a lot of them, but that's a lot to catch up on. So when the revival came out, I gave it a shot, and I loved it. And I think it's a nice way of not necessarily modernizing, but taking what the original show was by Dan Curtis, mixing it all up and spitting out 12-hour episodes worth of what we got, although we'll talk about the extended cut here in a moment. And I'm looking forward to going through each of these too. It kind of reignited my camp meter here, and this is something I really enjoy on the Extreme Movie Show because, like a lot of good things to it, it's got to pique your interest. You got to have good characters, you got to have good writing, you got to have a visual thing, you got to have the atmosphere to it. But I love this first episode. I'm getting ready to dive in. What's your brief initial take on this episode?
My name is Professor Pixel. My journey is just beginning.
Oh boy.
If you have been on this channel for any amount of time, you may have heard it before. There are a few things that I care about as much as Doctor Who, that's one, and Dark Shadows. The original series, all 1,225 episodes technically. But I've seen all that, and I was waiting to check out the revival series. I was just given some time, and it's been far too long. And so now going ahead and getting in to see this adaptation of the original series is astounding. And if you can't tell, I am truly excited.
Well, that's what we like to talk about here on the Extreme Movie Show. And of course, Extreme TV is just an offshoot of it here where we take something and go episode by episode and review it. So I'll tell you what, I'd like to go second because since this is a first watch for you and you're that young 20-something that likes obscure things, it'll be interesting to see how we take this. Take us through the first chunk of there and then get to a pausing point, and then I'll pick up.
Alrighty. Well, like in the original series, we have a character to center upon. It is the young Victoria Winters, who's accepted a job as a governess in a place called Collinsport.
Babysitter for the layperson.
Yes. Well, a little more than a live-in babysitter. They consider the nanny, the au pair, I suppose some people call it. But she is here to watch David Collins, and she is engrossed in the sudden world of the Collins family. We have our primary characters, and we get to meet them quite quickly. Roger Collins, the brother of the owner of the house, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. I'm glad they kept the name. And we get to see this fantastic home. And it is brilliant. It's beautiful. And Vicky, as we come to call her, goes ahead and gets to meet each of these people after being picked up by Willie Loomis, an impetuous youth who works as the groundskeeper of the Collins estate. And once Willie goes ahead and drops Vicky off, we go ahead and get to see him approach a tomb that he believes holds the Collins jewels.
Wow. I'm going to go back to the very beginning and take the more technical approach here while you're spooging, because this is it's very inviting when you watch this. So obviously there's a lot of stuff on Netflix. The current hot show is Wednesday, which is mildly entertaining. I'm actually several episodes into it, and whatever issues it may have, I go back to saying at least know who you're going to be when you're doing a show. And I think what's smart about this is Dan Curtis, who was involved in the show, had his fingerprints all over it. It knows who it is right off the bat. Within less than 5 minutes, more like 2 or 3, you get everything that I think just churns at you in a romantic, traditional romantic definition, you know, a longing, a whatever. You get this beautiful, gorgeous woman on 25 years old, prime right marrying age, on a train, and we get that stupid little, you know, electronic warble theme there that's kind of subdued, which we'll get in the music in a little bit. And she's on a train, and we get shots of the train, you know, going by this beach area, and we know they're going to some little desolate area in like Maine, and it's Collinsport. So you're getting a voiceover, which I always thought was personal and can be, if done right, is effective, not as a crutch. And she says the word journey no less than like 4 times I counted. I thought it was 5. And she automatically is basically through this voiceover telling you what's going on, what she's interested in. We don't know anything about her other than she's drop dead gorgeous. Terry Hatcher and her are like spitting images in a sense. They have that same kind of look in the 80s for those really dark haired raven beauties. But she is stunning. She's a natural beauty. And to me, we get that. We get all the setups for go, what the hell is going to make this a great show? Because we get tons of fog machines. I mean, they're working overtime on this, and that is friggin' fantastic. It's cheap, but damn it, it's effective. And Curtis has been doing this for, you know, over 20, 30 years at this point. He knows what he's doing. And he even made a Dracula movie that was good in the 70s, and he's done other things too. So he's got a lot under his belt. So he knows what the hell to expect. And for me, going, well, if I can, as a viewer in the late 80s, early 90s, watch this and see what the fuss is about from something that was, you know, over 20 years old at this point, maybe 12 hours is enough. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing now with these relaunches of shows. Unfortunately, I think the younger people in general doing them can't get them well. But I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. And you're right. If it's done well, we're being introduced to all the characters, including a very young Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's such a friggin' brat in here.
But it's great. It's great.
And he's like, he's got that punchable little kid face where you don't want to slap him. You just kind of like want to break his nose and have it just gush blood everywhere, because we're going to the Collinsport mansion and the grounds, and you've got the people upkeeping it. And you get lines like, you know, when she shows up there and the lady's showing her to room, like, oh, this is a wonderful place. You have how many rooms? She goes, I don't know. It's too many to count. Most of them are closed off, but you'll be here. They're introducing, just through little key comments like that, all this unknown mystery. So the setup here is absolutely fantastic. I think, like I said, if you're not hooked within a minute, you know, it might take a while for some people too, but for me, I'm sold. This is just what I want. And of course, we don't know really, again, anything about her background, which is a mystery too. So I just think it's pretty damn cool. And this Willie Loomis guy, who's a Barney Fife actor, he plays this over the top. But then you know what? You start seeing other people playing the roles completely over the top. But the one thing that is true, like in all great dramas, they're not winking and nodding at you watching it. They're taking what they do very seriously. And so they toe that line that you have to be, where if you try to like do the Barnabas speech at the end or whatever, you can't do that with a straight face. You have to own it and be in it. So is it over the top? Yeah, but I'm buying every bit that they're selling here. This is fantastic.
Yes. Oh, okay. So obviously, seeing the original series, I know key story pieces that they're taking for this, and a key one is with Willie Loomis. They've changed it some. Willie Loomis did not originally live on the Collins estate, but here he's related to Mrs. Johnson, the maid, I suppose we can call her. Is there another term that we could throw? Maid's fine. That goes ahead, and he works as, like I said, the groundskeeper. And one of the elements that they've gone ahead and shown is that Willie is obsessed with finding the family jewels. He is obviously not the learning type, but
the schemer.
That's right. He is a schemer. He pulls out the books. He's reading through them, and that's how we first meet him, because he's late for picking up Vicky.
Did you catch which one of the book titles was?
No, I didn't. What was it?
Book of the Dead, which to me implies the Egyptian Book of the Dead, because he's telling Roger, oh, I'm sorry, Roger, I was gonna go pick her up, and he's drunk off his ass and smokes cigarettes. Thank God people still smoked in TV here at this time, because he tells him, I'm not like learned like you and educated, so I got to do like you and start at the beginning reading, right? So there's this nice little thing, because you get the impression that Roger's the real dick around the household, but in my older age, I'm like, no, he's okay. He's got to be that. Somebody has to be that stern presence. And right now it's Roger, who, by the way, for you real hardcore freaks of the 60s TV shows, yes, he is the guy from The Invaders, which is a fantastic show. We'll probably do at some point here on Xtreme TV. I apologize for interrupting. Please continue.
No, you're fine. So Willie Loomis goes ahead and goes to the old Collins family mausoleum, believing that there's a secret buried there that will lead him to the jewels that he so seeks. And just like before, there is this fantastic lion's head there with this, yes, with this ring in its mouth. And once you pull that ring, because he's able to piece together the clues, goes ahead and pulls it down, a secret door in the back of the mausoleum opens up, and he believes leads him to his treasure, this large coffin that he's convinced it's in there. Well, he goes ahead, he takes off the chains, and he's ready to open it, pushing it, and that's when a hand from inside reaches up and grabs him. And then we cut away. There we go. We get to listen. When you watch the original series, things are taken much slower. Willie disappeared for episodes, and he's not even gone for like full 15 minutes. Because this is all of the meat of it just pushed together to create this episode to start us out here. So with that, we get to go ahead and see elements of the blue whale that we got to see earlier that night. There's a unique character, Daphne Collins. She did not exist in the original series, but here she seems to be this very bright, lovely young woman, helping out Sam, the bar owner of the Blue Whale, with his books before heading home. And that same night, she is viciously attacked by what seems to be, at least in the beginning, an animal.
Yeah, she this is again a weird time with the late 80s. You're not in the 80s anymore, but you have the leftover styles, and then the 90s had yet to be defined, and they never kind of did. That's when things went downhill, because it got to be kind of like the Seattle grunge kind of thing and all that. But here you still have the classic almost 80s big hair. It does have a Twin Peaks-ish kind of vibe to me, with the all-American kind of girls here with long hair. They're all tatted up and pierced up and all freaked out, or blue hairs and all that sort of stuff that you see prevalently now today, considered more acceptable. Not talking about anybody's personal preferences here, but it's just one of those things where you feel like you're in this town. And like I say, it's shot on a back lot somewhere, but you feel like you're there because of all the fog and everything too. Shoulder pads making these women look absolutely massive, like linebackerish. It's great. It really feels like, the time period that's being shot in. And to me, when you see this, it's like you kind of know what's coming and you get it. So you're not really surprised by what happens. So there's a part of you that wants to, appreciate, the act of being served a nice meal in itself is better sometimes than the meal itself. And it's a part of, rather than just eating or how it tastes or what it costs. And so the one person that I feel needs to get a big mention here, because we haven't talked about all the characters here, is the main cop, Mr. Patterson. We're going to be seeing a bit more of him too. I believe that's Richard Lynch. I got to look his name up here, who's like a character actor and how do you say it? A lot of the 80s stuff. He was actually a bad guy in one of the, I think it was the early 80s martial arts films starring Chuck Norris in there, where he's got like a staff and all that too. And this guy's underrated because he talks slow and deliberate like this. I'm like, this guy's a badass, and he's in here as a cop. I'm like, I'm not buying it. He's going to be a bad guy, right? And it's just, they've got a lot of decent actors in here too. So sometimes you can take somebody like this who you might recognize if you watch a lot of TV and just said, okay, that's cool that he's in here. But then sometimes, of course, we all know it's all going to run around Barnabas. So if Barnabas's entrance isn't, a big hit or not done well, or you don't believe it, no matter how you do it, even if you do a subdued approach, then things are going to falter, I think. Because right now, what we're seeing are relationships. So we see the young Collins kid there, Gordon Levitt, and he's an asshole. He needs a kick in the ass, literally. He needs the belt, as we would say back in the day, because we don't know that he's smart, but we know that he's privileged. But he's run people off before too, and the what made me laugh a little bit is there's a line by some of the elders in there about, well, Miss Winters was highly recommended, and I'm going, she can't even handle this kid, and he's a handful. But we find out he also talks to somebody that's like a special friend,
Sarah.
Yeah, which will come up again. But we almost find them pivoting very quickly, I think, in this episode between going at each other between parent and student versus, or I should say teacher and student, to like, our allegiance are going to be where we're going to have to work with each other. So I don't know. It's pretty interesting, like I said, when you see all these, because she gets along with Fife's character Loomis, because he wants to she takes him seriously at this point, and even though he's been attacked, when he goes to her and says, "Oh, I just want to say thank you, for stand up for me," when they're in the barn when she's going out for a ride, you could tell that he kind of likes her, not in a weird way, but you see these emotional things starting to develop, and there's not a rush in them, but they're very apparent. Because the next scene kind of puts everybody in their respective place, and it's kind of like the old classic, let's get everybody in one room, have somebody come in, and just sweep everybody off their feet. And a very, very popular movie in the early 80s was Chariots of Fire. Vangelis did the score for it. A guy in there named Ben Cross was I think one of the runners, one of the athletes in there. He had a prominent role. And I go, oh, it's one of the Chariots of Fire guys. But I'm like, I don't know who the hell Barnabas is, but this dude comes in. We know he's a vampire. He's rocking a turtleneck, so he's automatically cool. And to your point, taking it from the original series, he's got the cane and he's got the
ring.
Yeah, the index finger ring, because pinky ring means instant dry pussy, because women don't like that. But when you have a ring like he's got and all that, you're cultured. And his delivery here, his whole scene where he charms everybody, pretends to be a cousin, even though some people aren't buying it. And within like 2 minutes, basically makes them all love him. And he basically says, "Hey, I don't want to impose, but I want to fix up the
old house
or whatever like that." And the way he saves Loomis a little bit later on when they think he's the one responsible for these killings going on. Like, fuck, this guy's good. Yeah. So he comes in and he does the sexy suave thing before it got watered down in the pale-faced vampire boys in the 90s, which we've been unfortunately cursed with ever since. Barnabas' entrance is fantastic. Tell me what you think.
Absolutely. As soon as he walks up and knocks on the door and you have Mrs. Johnson open it up, tell her that Barnabas Collins, her cousin from England.
Too. Yeah.
It's so good. It's perfect. And the way that he just has to sometimes fix his own statements, because what he's saying, oh yes,
it's cold reading
just like I remembered. What do you mean that you remembered hearing about? Of course. He just hits it all so perfectly. And that scene later, after we get to see Loomis return, come out of the barn, and no, I would never hurt Daphne. And he's taken to the sheriff, and it's day, and then suddenly it becomes night, and Barnabas comes out, and it's so good. It's exactly what you need. Oh yes, he was working for me. That's where he's been. I'm sorry if I've caused any trouble.
Yeah.
But we're slowly taking a slight turn, because now we have a few victims that keep popping up, and the one that survived, Daphne, is who they're hoping to help. So we are able to see as, you know what, we need to go ahead and we need to call a specialist. And thankfully, there is a doctor there who knows someone to call, Dr. Julia Hoffman. And she is, oh, Julia. Well, with new Julia, we get to see her arrive in Collinsport rather quickly, examining Daphne, and she is able to make up a treatment. She has her suspicions. At this point now, they know that the attacks are not from an animal because there are traces of human saliva found in the markings.
Yeah,
and
there's a cell to there too that they tell us that they can't identify, and there are people in Boston can't either. And it's not a big deal, so I don't want to say it's a throwaway line, but it's significant because that's you always have to when you know something's vampires and there's werewolves and supernatural, you have to kind of know what the rules are. They're letting us know what they are, right? So it's like, okay, so how are they going to do with this and be consistent later on? Because we're going to measure whether or not they did effectively is whether or not it's considered a good episode. Part of it, anyway.
And there's actually a scene that we get to talk about with Dr. Hoffman once they decide, okay, well, we need to figure out the situation. But Daphne, even though she's recovered, doesn't remember a damn thing about being attacked. So she thinks that Daphne's mind pretty much hid it away in herself. So that way it doesn't harm her. Well, Dr. Hoffman in the original and this series has a little thing called hypnosis that she is going to try. And they go ahead and they use it on Daphne. And you know what she said earlier about them all pretty much going ahead and going a little over the top? Daphne does that here.
Oh, yeah. It's great. But if you don't, then what happens is if everybody's a little over the top but buying in their roles, then everybody seems like they're on the same playing field, right? It's like when you watch a basketball game on television, if it's the NBA, they all look like, for the most part, they're the same speed. But if you were to go out there, you'd be like, oh my God, these guys are 3 times as fast. But it doesn't look that way. It's when you get a clunker out there or somebody that stands apart that you notice the difference in that behavior. So in here, like I say, you've got Loomis, who literally is probably sub 100 IQ and maybe emotionally challenged as well. But his base instincts are there and he communicates them effectively. Even though we see him, we go, God, is everybody going to act this? It's like the fake drunk Kevin Spacey thing that he does. He overdoes it, right? But if everybody's acting a role, like Barnabas, really over the top, suave and smooth, even though he's a bit of a bitch, I think I'll get to that in a minute. And then, yeah, it's got to work that way too. So the kid was annoying, but you get it. And so all of a sudden, those first few scenes where we react pretty strongly to each one. Now we're gone. Okay, it fits, and we're not even halfway. We're about halfway through this extended episode 1 of the revival.
Yes. So only a few more things to cover for this episode. One of them is actually the old house, which, admittedly, knowing the original setting and how it looks, it's like Collinwood didn't bother me as much. It's nice. It's big. It's open. Fast. You feel that, okay, there are so many rooms here. How many? Where can we go?
Right.
But with the old house, it's weird not having a portrait up in the main foyer of Josette Dupre. But this is where we go ahead and get introduced to that part of the story. Barnabas has pretty much invited Vicky over to the old house. Vicky's visited a few times. Willie has tried to basically say, you know what, maybe you shouldn't stick around. You should go ahead and go. But Barnabas always arrives on time. And one evening when she's about to leave, Barnabas says, why would she need to do that, Willie? And he wants to go ahead and show her around, shows this old room that was found in its original.
I want to show you something. Yeah, okay.
Right. I was watching with somebody, and as we're watching, come in. I would like to show you something. His dick.
Exactly.
And then he went ahead and said, oh, believe me, I was surprised when I saw it as well. We were busting a gut. But no, we get to go ahead and see the room that once belonged to Josette, the woman who loved the original Barnabas back in the day, his ancestor. But here there is something quite funny. Victoria Winters is the spitting image of Josette Dupre. And Barnabas goes ahead and is able to slowly talk Vicky into believing, it's quite jarring how much you look like Josette. Maybe you and I, we are reincarnations of their past selves. And Vicky, like in the original show, is easy to fall into that line of thinking. It's so romantic to think about that maybe we are these lost souls brought again into the world. But Vicky, of course, it's time for her to go, and she does. But Barnabas has to beat the living shit out of Willie.
He does. I found this so humorous, though. I don't know why.
It's perfect. It's just like it was originally. You would take him and just start beating him with a cane. Why would you do that, Willie?
And then when Willie shows up later, like, "Oh, hi, Miss Winters." You can clearly see the 3 like cotton balls inside of his mouth and the fake stitches on his face, and he looks like he got fucking crushed worse than what we saw. I'm like, oh my god,
perfect! It's perfect. But later that night, Barnabas had walked Vicky home, and he goes ahead and he stands outside as she opens up the window, looks out, closes the drapes to get some sleep. And we get to see Barnabas with his fangs, which admittedly
trying to rub one out.
Goes ahead and his fangs are coming out, and he's like starving. And that's when you hear a small voice, "No, Barnabas, no." And it is
so bad.
It's Sarah Collins. And Barnabas, we went ahead and had the concept of Sarah introduced earlier to us, saw a portrait, and you can tell that he knows. And here you get to see Barnabas as, "Sarah, is that you?" And he's running after her, and his run is so weird. But he's saying, "Don't leave me! Not again! Please, Sarah, I cannot help myself." And it ends. Oh, it ends. And I'm so heartbroken that it's over.
Because this is a deliberately paced show, even though they're packing a lot in. So, like a lot of shows out there that have a lot of characters, you almost need to have a character cheat sheet. But sometimes when you're just watching it, you're going, "Hey, the person that does this," and I'll reduce myself down to function. Okay, so like for example, I'm going, wait a minute, the very first scene that we meet, Barbara Blackburn, who's this actress, she plays Miss Stoddard, she's like the slutty daughter of the
Carolyn.
from Carolyn's side of the family, because Roger and them, I guess, had remarried or whatever. It gets kind of convoluted if you don't keep track of it. And she makes comments about getting humped all the time and all that. So you can tell she wants a wing woman to go out with her and slay some male genitalia, if you know what I'm saying. She's just a party girl, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. But you meant Elizabeth's sides of the family because Carolyn is the daughter's name.
Right, but the point is like with Carolyn, you go, okay, she's the slutty one, so something bad's gonna happen to her, and the thing to forget here is by like the late 70s, early 80s, when audiences really wanted a lot of gore in movies and slasher stuff, a lot of things got kind of simpled out. And the thing that Kurtz does is he doesn't try to say, "Oh, I've got to change my magic formula for what's going on here in the early 90s about things." And I wanted to correct myself when I said that the earlier guy was Richard Lynch. It's Michael Cavanaugh. That is the cop, and he plays it with a certain kind of very quiet intensity, like this, like, "I am going to rip you apart piece by piece." You're like, damn it, I'm buying that. And that was Force Vengeance, was the movie that's been bugging me, but he was in a lot of stuff. So we got an old school tough guy in here. We've got the Invaders guy, a Quinn Martin production, that plays the dickish kind of guy. So we've got some male types here, right? Studs, all right. No matter whether you think they are or not, that's what they are. And then we get David Collins, the bratty little Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a kid because he is a kid in this, and again he needs to have his face just punched, and demolished. But pretty soon, just because he supposedly has this private friend Sarah, it almost all starts making sense. So this leaves us with Barnabas, and I'll say this: his entrance is fantastic. I'm buying him. But let's be honest, he's a bit swishy, and I don't think he's meant to be. But every '80s vampire from then on turned into I'm going to play the seductive side of the vampire. I'm going to be charming and witty rather than the feral beast that she just can't help herself with. Because let's be honest, when he's in there and he's speaking very particular in those 50-cent words, as a matter of fact, and that's what makes the delivery so good. You don't feel like the actor's trying. He's so good at it. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not buying it. But Victoria, she's dripping. I mean, the maid's like mopping up the floor behind her when she's walking around. She is.
Yes.
This guy's different. He's older. He's mature. He's got a shit ton of money. So she's locked in on him or whatever. And so she wants it so bad, she even convinces David, who just wants to terrorize her, to go over and see him. That was the scene you talked about when Willie got his ass beat. But when he loses his cool in here, and beats the shit out of him, I'm like, that's pretty fucking cool. And I'm left going, okay, I don't know what the vampire rules are. Like, is he allowed in without being invited? What about garlic? What about, all that stupid shit. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. But right now, at the end, when he's stalking her, this is just a really horrible, soapy romance angle. And we see that it's really the gothic thing of something tragic in the past hundreds of years ago. And we're reliving it now today. And I get it. So conceptually, it's very simple to understand. And I know that it's going that way, but I like and enjoy watching it, and it feels sort of fresh. And so to me, when he's out there and we already know based off of things that he's was courting Victoria and all that, and he's doing it in kind of a bitch sort of way, like, wouldn't it just be wonderful if perhaps we thought of, each other as it's like, dude, she wants you to bend her over. Just, do it politely and stop fucking talking. You know what I'm saying? She wants a man of action.
Yeah.
But it's the classic over the top type of corpse shit that we used to see back in the day. Whereas now it's like, yo, what's up? We gonna do this or what? I mean, and that's it. If that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that is the element, and everybody's copying this. Dan Curtis, like even his Dracula movie, he went ahead and borrowed the idea of Barnabas's lost love and wanting that. He is obsessed with it, but he is the man to pull it off. He's the one who is able to make it so that you're just watching and you're loving every bit of it, because you're watching this monster of a man be torn apart by inside, as his heart is longing for his dear Josette, and it's fantastic. Oh, listen, I was worried that the revival could not couldn't hold a candle to the original, but it did. It's not a one's better, no. This is a perfect adaptation of his original story, with elements obviously changed, but enough that keeps the heart of Dark Shadows, and it is perfection. Oh.
So to me, when Dan Curtis stopped, I think it's 71 or 72, the original show of Dark Shadows, obviously at the beginning it didn't start off being gothic and with all the supernatural elements, and that got added later, and that's when it became a bit of a hit. That tells you right there that the appetite for what would be on television, even though some television was written pretty good back then, was changing, or at least people were more acceptable to have fantastical elements in it. Not to the point where we're at comic book foolishness generally, like in movies and stuff like that today, but it is content that people do want to see, so it gets made. But back then, again, how do you modernize horror? We recently did a review of Rosemary's Baby, and we talked about how do you do it. Well, let's make it as modern as possible. Put it in the most modern city in the world, New York City, and make it where it's right out in the open. There's no secrets. Let's do that where there's no tricks, no gimmicks. Okay, let's see how you do it. Welcome to modern horror, Rosemary's Baby. But when Dan Curtis went to Dracula a couple years after this, like 74, 75, he had Jack Palance in it. And I've told you many times, Jack Palance terrifies the shit out of me. And even though he, God rest his soul, he was in Shane and a bunch of other stuff is the heavy with his delivery. The fact that he's grew up in a hard environment, Jack Palance did, it comes across, and you could say that about a lot of tough guys. Now, later tonight's movie, when we go live for our regular movie review and we go to do Robert Mitchum Night of the Hunter, it's the same thing. You believe these guys. And so I think the whole shift with, in the 70s where we can have crazy stuff like the Hammer horror films being modernized a little bit. You even have Dracula in the disco. You also have, something that we've talked about here on the Extreme Movie Show, Kolchak, the Night Stalker. We reviewed that. It's okay. You can do this. Okay, just try to treat it with a little bit of reverence and respect, and not make it completely stupid, because then it loses its luster. So to me, I could argue you've got this scrawny little stuffy ass British man coming over the pond, charming everybody because they're stupid, dumb Americans, or they're just thirsty for, oh, you're our cousin, okay. And in 10 seconds, he's like, I hope I won't impose, but I'd like to, repair this old building here. Oh, money's no cost, by the way. Yeah, okay, go ahead and do it without a cursory background check. It's pretty fucking ludicrous. Even at his ability, he's rocking that turtleneck, which instantly is supposed to translate into bad guy or don't trust me, kind of like glasses or a beard or poor hygiene, let's say. But he does it so fucking good. But he's the template. He's the guy that when you look at like Fright Night, even though that was a few years before this, they're going for the seductive approach. And it got so bad that in the 90s, when we had Interview with the Vampire, everybody's 150 pounds soaking wet pale, and you laugh at them because they're not powerful anymore. They really overdo it in the wrong way. And we've never, ever really recovered from that. So this, to me, is like one of the last little bits of TV or cinema that takes the vampire and says, okay, we're going to go for broke here, because he does such a fucking good job at it. And at the end, when he sees his young sister, the ghost, Sarah, and he calls out to her, I'm looking at that last minute when you just tell he feels guilty, grief-stricken, whatever you want to call it. He is, besides beating the shit out of Loomis, and this scene here, you're like, holy crap, when he's around humans, he's civilized and he's running the show. But you can tell the guy's friggin' tormented, and we don't know why. So you're like, God, I know he's supposed to be the bad guy, but what the hell grief is he going through? This is different. And when he streaks through the end, I'm like, oh my God, the camp level's on 13. It's, my radar's going off, blinking really fast and red. But like you, I fucking love it at the end. It's fantastic. It goes, damn it, I want to go get a drink and now watch episode 2. It's that good.
Yes, it is. I could talk in length about the original Barnabas and being able to live up to that example. Ben Cross here, may he rest in peace. He does it perfectly. And with that tormented side to him, it's everything you need. It's so funny to think about that originally this character that has become iconic was just meant to be written off 13 weeks later. But obviously that didn't happen because he's just that popular. He is the OG, as the kids would say, when it comes to romantic vampires, and he is the best. None can hold a candle to that.
Let's talk about one character, though.
Go ahead.
We briefly glossed over Dr. Julia Hoffman, who's the specialist that Sheriff Peterson or whatever is talking with, his coroner guy, with the whole cell and saliva angle and all that. So we get that as our only detective stuff, which seems more like the 80s kind of back to earth approach. She comes in and immediately you go, I don't trust her. I don't know if it's the big eyes. I don't know what it is. But I'm thinking it's weird because we got women that seem to be very sexually promiscuous. We get some that seem to be very stern. We get guys that seem to be like they're studs. But this is revolving around weak people. And so with her, I'm like watching her going, there's the scene where she walks in there and she's trying to, they bring I forget her name. Is it Daphne? They bring her back home to the Consport Mansion.
Yes.
And she's making
Daphne
out with her
Collins.
boyfriend because they're wanting to get down. And she's like, what do you give me? And she answers, well, something that'll help heal you. She's like, well, can't I just wait a few minutes? And she looks at them both because she caught them making out. She goes, yeah, I guess so. And of course she leaves there and walks out like no doctor would ever do. And I'm thinking, I can't trust her because she's not being professionally she's not being professional. I can't trust her professionally, so I'm questioning her personally. Because like she says to the guy picking her up, in the rain, when can I see the girl? And it's like, well, first thing in the morning. She goes, yeah, I'm really excited to see all that. So she's out here because she knows something's different. And when you get attracted to different, then you've lost. And so I'm automatically going, okay, she's going to be a sucker. She has to be, because she's middle-aged. She's by herself. We don't see her till later in the episode. Kind of like the same thing with Sarah, but I think that's different. And so I'm wondering about her. She seems to genuinely enjoy the promiscuous women about the house. Maybe it's a feminist thing. I don't know, but I already feel like Barnabas has more than one person that's going to be longing for his affection. And of course, since he's the man everything revolves around, that seems obviously the case. But what did you take of her in some of these interpersonal dynamics?
Okay. I will not get ahead of myself. It's very easy to, but when it comes to being introduced, I didn't know how much we were going to get of Julia here. But with her, she has a way of carrying herself that seems like she knows what she's doing. Yes, she's not acting professional, as you say, as she's letting the two just bang it out real fast before giving Daphne her medicine. But she seems very competent. She knows what she's doing. There's a reason why they called her, and I look forward to seeing more of her. That's what I'll say. That's what I'll say.
Okay, any other final thoughts on episode 1 of Dark Shadows, the revival from 1991, which you can now see, I believe, on YouTube TV, possibly on Paramount Plus. I've not verified it, but someone told me that they thought they saw it there.
If yes, you know what? Perhaps we should add the link to the series, the first episode at least, in the description, so that way people can go right there and watch it, because this you can watch for free on YouTube. Do not rob yourself of some of the best television there is, and that's what Dark Shadows is. It's so good. I cannot wait to talk about the next episode next week. But
it's good stuff. It's easily digestible. There's a lot going on, and like I say, within the first minute or two, they do such a great job of hooking you. And I feel like now, even with some shows that do 8 episodes, we feel like the first few episodes might be okay, then the rest suck, or they slow down in the middle and you go, God, you could have been 6. It seems like people are trying to figure out ways to stretch the material rather than pack all this wonderful shit in. And that's the difference between TV back then and now, is you could get a lot in there, especially in something as complicated as this. But right now, if you're walking away and you don't know everybody's name and exactly what's going on, you kind of get it. Okay, chick goes to place that's got a lot of backstory to it. There's stuff going on in the past, and oh, by the way, they look like reincarnated lovers from the past. That's the gist of it. That's all you need to know, and I'm sure it'll be reinforced in certain ways as we move forward. But I will say this: watching this live at the time, Twin Peaks was the major craze at the time, especially after they revealed Laura's killer, which you and I reviewed every episode here on Xtreme TV over the past year. Check that out. And of course, that includes season 3 as well as the movie. But one of the things I mentioned at the time was that was the hot thing. This Dark Shadows was very hot at the time too. But unfortunately, when the Gulf War broke out, they live TV would cut away to watch it. And so I remember sometimes you'd be watching a show, or it would happen even during sports, and they have to cut live to bring you up to date news they felt was compelling. It's not like that now. But that and other reasons, were why it only went just this one season, because I already am lamenting the fact that we're only going to have 11 more episodes to talk about. It's that entertaining, it's that good, and even though it's not easily available or widely available or talked about, it's definitely worth it for something, because all the modern stuff today comes from this stuff. Wednesday's a hot show that's out right now. That's great. It's got an interesting character that's done well. I've talked about how much I liked X and Pearl, and I like Ty West, the director. That lead actress is in it, and but it still has issues, and it looks great, but there's very few things that I think make you go, oh, I can't wait for the next one. And we'll see. Dark Shadows.
May I sing us out of here? Not sing us, but send us out.
Send us out.
Thank you for watching Xtreme TV on Xtreme Movie Show. Remember to stay extreme, and that Dark Shadows is a Dan Curtis production.
That's how it would sound. Not a Quinn Martin production, but Dan Curtis production. All right, everybody, for Professor Pixel, everybody involved here at the Extreme Movie Show, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for getting the word about us here on the Extreme Movie Show. That is the best thing you can do besides showing up and listening and taking part of your time to listen to what we have to offer. And see you next week for episode 2 of Dark Shadows 1991, The Revival. Out. Good night. Stay extreme.